We are finally back in the kitchen. Rafa is fine, although he woke me up 4 times last night with a funny tummy. So the first thing I am actually making is I am pureeing 2 pumpkins. He smashed out that other pumpkin we pureed last video really quickly because, you know, he'd eaten some things he wasn't supposed to eat. And obviously, if his tummy is still upset days later, that is still the case. So I need more pumpkin on standby. So I've got 2 ready to go. 1 is in there now, 1 is standing by. The other one needs to be pureed really soon. We're gonna make a couple of boiled eggs because I love egg sandwiches. And then I wanna get to trying some new recipes. I've got a chicken soup one and a roast veggie soup, and I need to slow cook a lamb shoulder. That one's not a new one. And I want to try, there's a recipe that I got from YouTube ages ago that I cooked for my best friend's birthday, and it is called on YouTube like the world's best vanilla cake. And oh my god, it is so good. I was very skeptical, but when you look in the comments, everybody's like, oh my god, this is the best cake I've ever made, and holy beep, it really was. So I actually ordered this pure culinary lavender from Tasmania recently because I want to try and see if I can make a lavender style cake. And so I want to try and make that vanilla cake recipe and put in a little bit of lavender. I normally don't freestyle from recipes because I don't trust my palate, but I'm going to try, and I'm thinking that I'm going to make it a double layer cake, and I might try and make the bottom one, or the top one, doesn't really matter, lavender, and then the other one lemon. Seeing I have a bunch of lemons at the moment, it seems like a perfect time to do it. I would love to be in the garden planting my own lavender, but once again it is raining and everything just looks so sad and dead out there, except for my violas and pansies. They look totally fine, but everything else, oh, it just looks destroyed, and I'm kind of hesitant to plant anything else because the weather has been so bad. So it's very depressing for someone who is really enjoying life in the garden to not really be able to spend much time in it. I've also been super busy, obviously attending the vet with Rafi and dealing with all of my medical stuff, but I have also been doing some job interviews, which has been interesting. So anyway, let's get to cooking and see how we go. So hopefully you can see, this is why I decided to get a new chest freezer, because the old one I inherited-ish from my grandparents, the freezer doors kept coming off, so every time you would open the door, stuff would come flying out, particularly if it was in these boxes. If it was big enough that, you know, it was one large chunk, you'd be fine, but anything like this, and it would destroy these freezer boxes, which was extremely annoying, especially when it's for the dog food, and it's like, well, it doesn't really matter what food it's for, it's just annoying. So there's a couple of busted ones of these, but I'll try and use them for as long as I can, but that'll be fine for Rafi's food. And I know I dropped a bit, but he'll come and do cleanup in a minute when it's cooled down. These little cups will actually be great for when we go to Sydney. They're just the perfect size for 1 or 2 meals for him. And the reason I steam his pumpkin is a lot of the time with steamed vegetables, particularly for your dark green vegetables like your broccoli and things like that, you actually need to steam them for them to become a bit more bioavailable for dogs. So, I mean, it's kind of important to do at least like a light steam or a blanch for some of them, but I find texture-wise Rafa prefers his vegetables cooked or frozen. If I give them to him frozen, he will eat anything and think that he is a lucky boy who just got the best snack in the world. But if I give him raw broccoli, nah, won't touch it. But even if it's blended raw, he loves it. So it's worth experimenting with, and it's really a great way to add some anti-inflammatory foods into their diet and to help them have like a healthy gut microbiome and all of that sort of thing, which, I mean, I could use some work on myself. I had a nap today, which is unusual, but I felt really tired, obviously, because Rafa had got me up during the night a couple of times to go outside. but I've also been feeling a bit off lately, and it could be kind of the tick bite and all the trips to hospital and all of that sort of stuff. But I mean, I've had low iron levels for a really long time, like 13 years, a long time, that no one ever told me to take any medication, even though I was telling them I was tired. And I've obviously also had thyroid cancer, so every so often I need to make sure I'm taking naps, especially when I get into one of these tired runs, because I find the second I get tired, especially since I had the cancer, if I don't rest enough, then I start getting tonsillitis. And in this kind of world at the moment, nobody wants to get tonsillitis. While everything's getting pureed, I'm going to put a couple of eggs in some boiling water. I don't know if you guys have ever done this trick to hard boil your eggs. My best friend taught me this, is you put the eggs in cold water and bring it to a boil, and the second you've got a rolling boil in your water, you turn off the heat and pop the lid on. And she said it's something like 12 minutes, but I literally just leave it until the water cools down, and it's a perfect hard-boiled egg every time. There's none of this like complicated trying to remember how long you should leave them in. You just whack them in, turn the heat on, and once it's boiling, turn off the heat and put a lid on. It's that easy. There you go, Puppet. So these will all go in the freezer now once they've cooled down, but you can see I've still got these garlics that need to be planted, and I really need to get around to doing them. I also have another couple in the other room, so they need to get done. I just need to find some time and have it not rain for 5 minutes. So now that all the easy stuff is done, I've still got to package away a little bit more of the pumpkin. I am going to get on to blanching some tomatoes so we can have some bruschetta. What I'm trying to do is get all the easy stuff done first, so that if for some reason I get derailed, at least the basics are done. So the pumpkin is pureed and blended. The eggs are just sitting now in the water doing their thing. And I think I'll probably have that for dinner tonight, because I haven't actually got anything else planned. And the problem is I need to have some of these things done really for tomorrow, because lately I've been eating more takeout food because I haven't done this cook to prep for the month or the 2 months or however long the food lasts. And often it lasts for more like 2, because you know, you go out with friends or whatever. But I mean, I really need to do this so I can minimize my spending, and also because, you know, fresh fruit and veg isn't always available at the moment. I was doing the shopping for the roast vegetable soup, because most of my veggies have died out in the veggie patch with all the rain, and there were a lot of things I couldn't get or had to visit multiple stores to get. And actually I should have gone to the farmer's market this morning when I was in town for an interview, but it didn't occur to me, so that's life. So right now I'm going to get these tomatoes ready for blanching, and then I will blanch them for about a minute and then leave them to cool for ages before I start to actually put together a bruschetta. I really love bruschetta. I haven't made it in ages, and it's kind of one of those things that can taste really good if you're gluten-free, and it tastes really good on gluten-free bread, so that's a win. So the water is boiling and bubbling, and all I need to do is just slice in a cross shape. I like to go quite a bit into the tomato, so at least 1/3 to 1/2 of the way. It just makes it easier to peel off the skin after you've blanched it, and honestly I haven't found it makes any difference to the taste whether you are more shallow with your splice. I've discovered it makes a huge difference with how easy it is to peel your tomatoes. So all I have to do now, I have the crosses cut into my tomatoes, is to actually blanch these for 1 minute. And this is why this is in the easy category of food, because kind of like boiling water for eggs, it's not very hard. And when you put it together with a little bit of diced garlic, and you can put red onion with it if you've got it, and then some basil and a tiny little bit of balsamic vinegar, tastes so good on toast. And it lasts for a couple of days in your fridge if you don't eat it first. So let's get this in the water. So you know they're ready to come out number one, when a minute's passed, but also, I hope you can see it, when you get this kind of peeling of the skin. So once the skin starts to peel back, it's time to pop them out. So you can see some of them have split really, really well. So now these will just be let to cool down. And I let this one stay in for a little bit longer because it is out hot, not as split as, say, this one. And it'll be interesting to see how much more easily the skin comes off. You can see on this one the skin is already just ready to peel off. So that will make it just so much easier to prep this bruschetta. Next on the list of things to get done tonight is a slow baked lamb shoulder. This recipe essentially is a bunch of salt and pepper, rosemary, Italian herbs, particularly oregano, all mixed in with oil and rubbed all over a lamb shoulder and then cooked in a little bit of red wine vinegar and water for as long as it takes for the lamb to be nice and succulent and be able to be shredded really easily with a pair of forks. Otherwise, it's not done enough. And then once you've shredded it, what you need to do is put that meat on a baking tray and grill it for 2 to 3 minutes, just long enough for the tips of the shredded meat to get a little bit crispy. This meal is so good, and I don't make it very often because, number one, lamb shoulder is very expensive, and I don't eat a lot of meat, to be honest. But I will eat this if I'm going to eat real bread. I find that, okay, yeah, it's still nice on gluten-free bread, but as what is essentially a slider on a soft white bread roll, oh, it is so good. Generally, I will cook this in the slow cooker because then I can just walk off and leave it, and also because this house is very inefficient with its gas use, but because I want to do a couple of things tonight, I'm going to pop it in the oven, which means I need to wrap it up really well in foil so it doesn't dry out. Next on the list of things that I was going to work on was a slow cooker chicken noodle soup. I've never made a chicken noodle soup before, although it was a favorite as a kid. So I thought this would be a great one to do in the slow cooker just because then it's a one pot recipe and that minimizes my cleanup, which is one of the reasons why I like to do these batch cooking sessions, is because I hate cleaning up. So if I can just destroy the kitchen over 1 or 2 days and then clean it up once, then that is preferable to cooking regularly and having to clean up regularly. This way I can just pull it out of the freezer and move on with my life and have as little washing up as possible. This is so gross. There's still unplucked feathers. Oh, that's upsetting. That's upsetting. Oh, I might be back to being a vegetarian in about 3 minutes. Oh. Like always, I used a homemade veggie stock paste, which is a Thermomix recipe. I use this stock paste in everything. I love the flavor, and I always put way more than is necessary in every meal because it is so tasty. And also I put it in this because I was a bit worried about how this was going to taste. I make a lot of bone broths for my dog, and I just hate watching how the water essentially changes with the meat just long soaking in there, especially with chicken skin still on. I was a bit traumatized, I think, after the feathers. But I covered that chicken up with some parsley from the garden and just crossed my fingers and hope for the best. While I tried really hard not to think about feathers floating around in my soup, I got back to making the bruschetta as the tomatoes had cooled down enough. So I peeled the skins off first, and then I diced them into quarters. I cut out all the seeds and the liquidy mixture in the middle, and then you've got to squeeze your tomatoes to get out as much of the liquid out of the tomatoes as you can, and there is quite a lot. And the reason you do this is because otherwise you end up with a very watery bruschetta, and the longer your bruschetta stays in the fridge or stays uneaten, the more watery it will get anyway. So you want to squeeze out as much as you can before you dice up the tomato. I try and just use fresh cut garlic because there are health benefits to consuming garlic that has been recently cut. The longer you leave it out, the more it loses those health benefits. But I also just hate cutting garlic. So I did use some minced garlic that's been in my fridge, and I chopped up what basil I could find in the garden, which wasn't very much given that it's winter. And I forgot to buy some at the shops, and I wasn't going back to the shops. Obviously, with a tomato and basil mix, you need a decent amount of salt in there, but I also added some diced red onion for a change. I usually quite like this combination, but I forgot that post-tick bite, my body's been very, very sensitive to anything vaguely resembling spice, and so I didn't enjoy this bruschetta as much as I hoped because I found the red onion incredibly spicy, which is pretty pathetic. I love cracking my eggs like this. There's something so satisfying about rolling them. Sometimes it makes them super easy to peel and everything just comes straight off, and other times it makes it more of a pain in the butt to peel them, but it's still just so satisfying to roll them out. I'm so glad I did all the easy things first and then moved on to the slow cooker and the lamb that's now slow cooking in the oven, because what it means is that by the time dinner's rolled around, everything that's small is ready to be quickly finished up, and the soups and the lamb have still got another couple of hours to go, especially the soup. The soup was so gross with the hairs on the chicken, the feathers on the chicken. There were hairs as well, which was really, really gross. But I feel like it's going to be a while between when I eat this soup and when I've cooked this soup. But I think like this is a good amount to have gotten done today. I feel quite efficient. So, I mean, once I've peeled these eggs, I'll wash them up and then I'll get them ready for dinner. And then I think that's enough for today, and I'll deal with the potato and leek soup that I want to make and the roast veggie soup tomorrow, because I think they both probably require either the oven or the slow cooker. And right at the moment they are both occupied. It's always nice to feel like you've actually managed to achieve something for the day, because so frequently I feel like I get to 5 o'clock and the day's over and I've got no idea what the hell happened in that day. So this will be tonight's dinner, and I've overdone it a little bit with the mayonnaise, but well, whatever. And even though I really love this as a meal, or just like I love the flavor of this, I don't eat it a lot because I use eggs mostly in gluten-free baking to hold things together, because otherwise everything falls apart. And I'm kind of aware that eggs are sort of full of hormones that are designed to help a little chicken emerge into the world, and I've had a hormone-based cancer, so I try not to eat eggs, especially on their own, too much. But I mean, in gluten-free baking, you pretty much have to, or nothing ever stays together. So this is kind of like a real treat for me. The lamb has now been in the oven for about 3 hours and it smells amazing. It's time to see if it's done. There's a lot more liquid in that than normal. Ordinarily, because it's a larger lamb, normally more of the juice is kind of burnt off than what I can feel in there. And basically you want to keep going until it shreds apart. And I mean, I could pull that apart if I really wanted to, but it's not as easy as I'd like it to. So I'm going to flip them and pop it back in the oven. I find it often takes quite a while to get going. But it's a very rainy evening, so there's nothing much else happening. So we'll wrap this back up and get it back into the oven. It has been another hour and a half, so this should be most certainly done now, and I hope it is, because this house seems to go through gas like crazy, and ideally I don't want to have the oven on any longer, because we all know we want to preserve our gas, and that absolutely looks perfect now. You can see that's pulling apart really easily. So what I'm going to do is scoop this up and pop it in the fridge, and I will deal with it tomorrow once it's cooled down. But basically how I serve this is I shred it, and you leave a little bit of the juice with the meat so it doesn't dry out. And then you grill the meat for 1 to 2 minutes just till it feels like a little bit crispy on top. And then you kind of turn it into a slider so you can put it in a bread bun. It's not as satisfying in gluten-free, I'm not gonna lie. But in like a soft white bread bun, amazing. But you can also have it obviously as a roast, but it's beautiful, and you can see that's pulling apart perfectly now. So tomorrow I will actually shred this up and freeze it in smaller portions. But it's 10:30, so I'm not dealing with that right now. I'm just going to preserve a bit of the juice. Normally, because as I said, normally it's a bigger piece of lamb that I do this with. I don't normally have this much juice, nor does it usually have this much sort of seasoning and everything and flavor on it. But I mean, you can't have too much flavor, so can't say I'm all that worried. So I put the normal amount of liquid and flavoring, well, almost the normal amount of liquid. So hopefully should be nice and tasty. So the last thing I need to deal with tonight is the soup. It's been going for about 4.5 hours. I will say I don't love the smell of it, but I really dislike the smell of chicken anyway, so I don't know that I'm the best judge for this. I feel like that chicken looks still a tiny bit pink. It did say it could cook for 8 hours if it was on low. And I feel like that probably actually, like where that skin is peeling off. Like, I mean, it could be perfect underneath, but it could also just be, it just still looks a little pink. And I'm very paranoid with chicken. It just looks the slightest bit pink. And I've got to say that I'm one of those people that tends to overcook chicken out of paranoia. And I'd much rather a dry chicken than even the slightest of slight hints of pink. I can't cope when it's chicken wrapped in prosciutto because it always looks pink. So I'm actually going to allow it to finish the full 8 hours. So I'm going to put it back on, and that means it'll be going while I'm sleeping overnight. And this will go on to a keep warm setting once it's done. So I will Google and just make sure that that's okay. But I actually have to be up in about 6.5 hours. Oh no, bad maths. I need to go sleep. I don't know if you can keep chicken on the keep warm setting in your crock pot overnight. I'm really paranoid about chicken because I just don't like the smell of it at any point anyway. And so I really struggle with knowing if the chicken is still good. So I'm going to consult Dr. Google on this one, and plus I assume that it's going to be just fine. Otherwise people wouldn't use crock pots as much as they do. So this still has another 4 hours to go. To my eye, this still looks pink, and when you pull it out, I mean, it fell apart. So I know it's done, and it falls apart the minute I pull at it, but it also looks pink, and that's what freaks me out about chicken. So, I mean, I'm pulling this out now because I've got to go to the hairdresser, but I will go through this more later on. Honestly, I'm probably going to pop it back in for a bit more. It's the next evening, and I'm just getting around to going through the soup, which has been sitting in the fridge all day. But you can see, I mean, I think it looks a little bit more pink on camera, but there's still some definite pinkness to this. So if I then put this back in the slow cooker to give it some more time now that the rest of the carcass has been removed, am I going to get like salmonella poisoning? Because I just got bitten by another tick today. So, I mean, I just don't like need this as a problem. And I'm really struggling with the smell of chicken, but trying to make some healthy, different meals. But I mean, this chicken was being slow cooked for 8.5, 9 hours. And when I went to take the chicken out, it literally fell apart. So theoretically it should be done, but I don't know. I've got a roast veggie soup going, so carrots, ow, that's hot, and capsicum and some garlic are about to go in the oven. Tomatoes and zucchinis also have to go in the oven. The cauliflower and onion have just come out, and the other part of the cauliflower and the capsicum are about to come out now. And then I've got the beginnings of the potato leek soup happening as well. Lots and lots of leeks and potatoes ready to go. So the leeks and the garlic have been going for a little while now. I'm going to pour in the veggie stock. I still need another 2 cups of water. The only time I have left, some bay leaves, and round 1 of the potatoes. So then with this potato and leek soup, all I need to do is bring it to a boil and keep going until the potatoes are really soft, and then remove the bay leaves and the thyme and blitz it all up. I will add cream after I've frozen it though, because apparently if you add cream before you freeze, it doesn't defrost so well. Forgot the salt and pepper. Potato and leek soup is going. The last of the roast veggies for the roast veggie soup are in the oven. The others are just sitting by because they'll all have to go in this pot. This is the only large pot I have, so I'll have to finish with this one, blitz it up, and then package it up to be frozen, and then wash it out, and then I can get going on the roast veggie soup. In the meantime, I'm going to start something in the slow cooker. This is just going to be nice and simple. I've got 3 chicken breasts, which I have sliced to just allow the flavoring in there a bit more. I've put a little bit of water in there so that it doesn't burn, but I'm just going to douse the chickens in some marinade and then allow them to slow cook for, I think it was about 3 hours last time. And then that let me get shredded chicken, which was actually quite tasty. And this is just kind of perfect for a nice easy meal. I use the shredded chicken, like I often freeze most of it, and I use it for things like chicken on rice, or even in veggie rice paper wraps that I do often, or just regular wraps. So this is just a nice easy one. I don't have to do much. I can just set it and walk away. The potato and leek soup is finally done. The veggies have finally roasted in the oven. So it's time to do my favorite part, which is the blitzing. Whoops! I actually don't think that needs the double cream at all. I'm just going to keep it and freeze it as it is. There's still a couple of stray potatoes in there that need to be blitzed, but I'm really happy with this. This is a great outcome. I'll definitely be making this recipe again. I make a lot of pumpkin soup and you get kind of sick of it. And I've been eating a lot of minestrone lately, which I really like, but again, you get sick of it if it's on repeat, and I feel like I've been cooking a lot of meals with meat in them and freezing them, which is great, but like I prefer to eat more vegetarian than not, despite the evidence to the contrary. But yeah, this will be great to have another great vegetarian meal. If you guys have any other gluten-free, like vegetarian meals that you recommend, please let me know below in the comments. I would love to know. I mean, my main thing is that I keep putting meat back in my diet because I really struggle with my iron levels. So hopefully that little fish that I showed you in one of the last videos will actually help, because I did actually speak to the company and I was like, hey, it looks a bit like banged up after its first use. And they said apparently that's normal because they coat it with some sort of like edible oil so that it comes off so it's protected from like oxidizing and rusting when it's in transit, but it's good to go then from your first use. So hopefully it's all good, and hopefully that works as a way to maintain my iron levels. Like I said, a friend of mine's been using it for ages and it's new to me. This kitchen is in utter chaos and oh, I'm exhausted, but yeah, this is the little iron fish that I got and used for trying to maintain my iron levels a little bit more from chronic deficiency. It's called Lucky Iron Fish, but definitely make sure you get the proper brand one. But even still, I mean, it freaked me out a little bit, but Thankfully it hasn't rusted, although my friend said hers rusts quite a bit and she just cleans it off before she uses it. I don't know, if you've used one before, let me know. Look at how beautiful and thick this is. Oh, so lovely. There's 22 minutes left on the chicken. I've got 11 servings of potato and leek soup to go in the freezer, and they're kind of like 11 small-ish servings to remind me about appropriate portion sizes. And I'm just about to get started on the roast veg soup. I've just got to add the potatoes and the zucchinis to the roast veg mixture. The potato and leek soup is so good. I'm not going to add the cream, and that's from Once Upon a Chef, that recipe. And this one is from Busy Baker, I think. I'll just double check. Thebusybaker.ca, sorry. But I've never tried this recipe before, and it called for eggplant in the recipe, and I loathe eggplant with a fiery passion. So I just put in an extra half of cauliflower and an extra onion. So we'll see how it turns out, but I just can't do eggplant. The recipe then calls for 5 cups of veggie stock or chicken stock, and I'm using veggie stock paste with water. The veggie stock paste is a Thermomix recipe, and I love this stuff. It tastes so good. I always put way more tablespoons of it in everything than any recipe ever calls for, because otherwise I don't feel like you can actually taste the seasoning, but it's also just a really tasty stock. So time to get this brought up to a boil and then let it simmer for a little while, and then puree this into a soup. I forgot, before I blitz this, I actually need to add a cup of coconut milk to the mixture to make it nice and creamy. So still a couple more steps to do, and then I am done for the evening. So there were about 11 serves of the potato and leek. Hopefully I'll get 6 to 8 of this. I got about 14 of the minestrone that I made the other day, and there's the lamb that I put away, the slow cooked chicken that is currently still going. It's got another 7 minutes to go. And then there's the chicken noodle soup, which I reckon that's probably like 8 servings. So there now is tons and tons of soup for me to work through over the next month, probably 2 or 3. And there's also quite a number of other things now in my freezer to work from. So I feel like in the last couple of days I've achieved quite a lot in the afternoons, just trying to make big batches of food that I can come to whenever I need food and can't be bothered to cook, which is very, very often. The chicken is done, but I actually remember being told once before that once you can kind of shred it, you should pull it apart just a little bit and then let it slow cook for another half an hour, just to let those flavors of the sauce go right into the chicken. So I'm going to pop it on for a little bit longer, especially seeing as I didn't actually have time to pre-marinate it. So hopefully this is not going to make the chicken all rubbery. I just remembered the other thing I cooked before, apart from the various attempts at gluten-free bread, was a cauliflower pilaf, which means there's lots of cauliflower to be eaten in the next month or 2, which is fine because that's what's coming out of the garden. There really isn't much else coming out of the garden because everything else is dead or in that kind of in-between phase where it's not quite ready to harvest, but we're getting there, but it's coming along really slowly because it's winter and because of the amount of rain we've had. Everything else, like my beans, have all got fungal infections. I'm not sure about the potatoes. They look pretty squashed, although I think that's Rafa's fault. And some of the lettuces look to have, was it leti? Some of the lettuces look to have some sort of problem as well. And other than that, because it's winter, there's nothing else coming up. Although the silver beets are not too far away, they're looking pretty chewed. And I did notice there was a little broccoli sprouting from a plant that has no leaves because it's been that chewed. So I guess where there's a will, there's a way. So hopefully if the rain holds out for a bit tomorrow, I might get to go into the garden and finally plant the other garlic that I've got to plant and rip out some of the other plants that are done for the season or forever. And then I need to start looking at what I'm going to plant for spring and get that going soon, because it's starting to feel like things are changing and like it's just that little bit warmer. And those sorts of things, they need to get done so that when I'm in Sydney for bits and pieces of time, getting all like my medical tests and stuff like that, that they can just be doing their thing and growing, and I'm not missing week after week just because of timing and life. Okay, so it looks like it's all blitzed up now. It's a bit more of a watery soup than I like, but it'll still be totally fine with toast. Now, I guess the challenge is to balance that there and to try it without burning my face off. It's too hot. I can't do it. Too hot. Okay, so this has now been sitting for about 15 minutes, so I'm going to give it a taste. Hopefully it's good, and then I'm going to pack it up, clean up, and head to bed. That's really nice too. I think it could probably use a little bit more salt, but it's really, really nice, and it'll be really nice on toast. I'm really happy with the way these new meals are turning out. It's nice to have a little bit of variety and to actually have new recipes work out. Last week I tried to make a bunch of gluten-free breads using different recipes and they just didn't work out. So it's really nice to have some success with some main meals, especially because it's going to take the pressure off me to cook regularly, which I don't like doing, because as a one-person household, it means you end up eating the same thing all the time, or you end up doing dishes all the time, or it just chews up so much time. So I much prefer to sort of do ideally one big cooking day, maybe two, but this has been spread out over a couple of evenings because it's just the way life is at the moment. But I'm really glad that this has worked out and it's actually quite tasty, and I'm gonna have some more. I'm really looking forward to spring and summer and being able to create and preserve some more of my own produce to kind of increase my food security. As much as I love having a freezer full of prepped meals because it makes my life so much easier, and it means that I don't, you know, eat as much takeout or as much rubbish food because I've got food ready to go. I kind of feel like I can't really count freezer food into kind of my food security plans, because like if the electricity goes out, then you lose everything in the freezer. So I'm really looking forward to thinking about how to plant a veggie garden a little bit differently, and looking into different ways of preserving food now that I have a pressure canner and a dehydrator, and I'm really hoping to get a freeze dryer. There's a ton of things I would love to freeze dry, like the veggie stock paste, and I'd love to turn that into a powder, because when I make that, I try and usually make a whole bunch of it all in one go. And again, this is just to kind of like reduce the cleaning. If I'm making a massive batch, then I don't have to keep cleaning the Thermomix every, you know, week or two, however often. But it also takes up a lot of room in the fridge. So if I could turn it into a powder, that would be amazing, and obviously more shelf stable. So hopefully a freeze dryer is in my future, but given the Australian dollar to the US dollar, currently they're priced at $8,500, and I emailed to order one the other day, even though it's $8,500 and it's gone up about $1,000 in the last 2 months. And they said that they're waiting to see if there's much interest in another shipment this year, and they're going to have to put their prices way up because of everything that's going on. So I don't know, there may or may not be a freeze dryer in my future. Depends on a couple of things. We'll see how that turns out, but it's nearly time to start planting my spring seeds and planning my veggie garden for next year. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.